birth to Eternia, the first planet in all of creation. But now their magic is gone. And without magic, Eternia will rot and die. And as goes Eternia, so goes the entire universe.
I held a life of truth. Away from magic. Now you want me to save magic?
Masters of the Universe Revelation, in my opinion, is a great mini-series because it's only 5 episodes. And within that time frame, they were able to tell a lot of story. So I give the creators kudos for that. I believe Kevin Smith of Clerks and Chasing Amy fame he was heavily involved in this series. So a lot of the things that were done, I kind of see it as things that he would do as a writer-director. But where Masters of the Universe Revelations seems to falter and succeed at the same time is the fact that they don't focus on Adam or He-Man, who's the main protagonist of the entire series. You know, they don't focus on He-Man. So that alone made it very interesting to me. Each episode had its own form of reveals. So let's start there. In my personal opinion, I think this is somewhat of not a feminist trap, but this is somewhat of a pro-feminist attempt at telling a story using a franchise that's about 40 years old, if not longer, or if not older. What they did in this series is, instead of focusing on the main character, that character, and be prepared, right? There's spoilers coming, a lot of spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to go see it and then come back to this. But what happens is several main characters seemingly die in the beginning. And when I say main characters and seemingly, I mean the main characters, the main protagonist and the main antagonist, which are He-Man / Prince Adam and Skeletor. They both die in the very first episode within the first 5 to 10 minutes. And I thought that part of the story was excellent because it was so unexpected when you first see it. And it kind of lays the groundwork for the story of what I call Teela's story, or the adventures of Teela. Because now what happens is Teela becomes the main focus of the story. She becomes the main focus of Revelations, which is fine. And Teela is a great character. I personally grew up watching, like a lot of people in the 80s who grew up as little kids in the 80s. I grew up watching He-Man and the Masters of the Universe in several different incarnations. But the original series in the 80s was by far the best until 2011. And as you can see, you know, I lost my mind in 2011. Until 2011, which that particular reboot was, I think, the best reboot so far. There is another reboot that came after Revelations, which is more in the CGI style. But the point I'm trying to make is a lot of people grew up on He-Man in the 80s, the 80s version of He-Man. And so He-Man is a very big franchise and very well beloved character. The problem I find with this series, though, is that they killed off He-Man and they killed off Skeletor in the beginning, and that laid the groundwork for a new person to step in, which is Teela, which is a character I loved from the beginning, who I always felt never got enough shine. She never got enough airtime. And a lot of times she was doing a lot of work. She was doing a lot of things that were saving He-Man's life and really contributing to all of Eternia as a hero. In this show, she gets all the recognition she deserves. And she becomes a hero. But she does so after finding out the truth about He-Man being her best friend, Adam. So now, instead of conforming with everyone else, what she does is she basically says, fuck you to everybody. You know, she gives everybody a big middle finger and then walks out and says she's tired of the BS and she's tired of putting up with people's lies. She was like, you know, she's basically upset that everyone knew this big secret that Adam and He-Man were the same person, except for her. And in my opinion, I feel that she had every right to be upset. But what happens next is somewhat of a journey into a space that I felt always meshed really well within the He-Man universe, which is it becomes a battle not just for Teela to kind of find herself and find not so much a road to redemption, but find her way to understanding and accepting the truth. In the midst of doing this, she also becomes an advocate for science over magic. Because when He-Man and Skeletor dies, there's something that happens that ends up draining Eternia of all its magic. And what you find out is that Castle Grayskull is not what it seems. Castle Grayskull is actually a nexus for all of magic throughout the entire universe, and the sword, He-Man's sword, is actually the conduit from which all that magic resides or flows through. Hence his ability to transform from a teenage boy into a hulking superhero. But now, after his death, we find a new landscape for Eternia. We find a landscape where He-Man and Skeletor no longer exist. And now everyone who was associated with these two characters are trying to find their way. They're trying to find their way through life without these two big influences around to tell them what to do or to aid or to challenge or what have you. The story is really good. I mean, I really loved the story. I loved the pacing of the story. For 5 episodes, I really think they did a great job. I would have liked it to be a little longer, 10 to 12 episodes. But for what they did in such a short amount of time, they did a great job. And, some of the things that I really enjoyed within the first couple of episodes, the first 2 to 3 episodes, was the fact that I saw Moss Man, which was one of my favorite characters growing up as a kid because he never got a lot of airtime. And the way he's presented, he had a cameo both in the beginning and at the end. And then I also enjoyed the way, like I said before, they basically put a spotlight on Teela and showed what she was able to do. And the other thing I really enjoyed was the fact that a lot of the characters kind of fell into the same position as Teela. Not so much where they had a full spotlight, but a lot of characters that if you ever watched the original series, that they were just supporting characters. Now, or they're placed more in center stage. Because back with the original series, what used to happen is you had 3 main characters that always got the spotlight. It was always He-Man, Man-at-Arms, and then on the bad side, it was always Skeletor. So you had 3 characters that were always interacting with each other, and Teela would always be like a backup character or a sidekick. But in this, she gets her shine. So do characters like Orko, which was basically comic relief in the original series. In this, Orko is probably my favorite character because his transition from buffoon from what we saw in the original series to a character who's dying because there's no more magic, right? Because once He-Man died and the event that happened, all of magic or most of the magic was drained out of Eternia. So people who depend on magic are kind of scraping by, trying to find somewhat of a life in this world that existed mostly on magic. And this is where the magic science thing comes into play, because now Teela, who lived a life defending a world of magic, is realizing that magic was not so much of a benefit, it was a detriment, because when it was around, people were fighting so much more over it. And now people have to be resilient, people have to depend on their own minds, and people have to create. And so enters the age of science. My problem personally with that whole shtick is the fact that in the original series, the magic and science was never separate. It always meshed well. You know, you always had He-Man with, you know, running around with his magical sword that could transform him from, you know, a scrawny little kid into this superpowered being. But he always had like the best weapons and the best vehicles. You know, he had vehicles that could fly that weren't magic. He had tanks, he had other vehicles that rolled on the ground, he had sea vehicles. So, you know, them presenting this divide between magic and science kind of took me for a loop, because it always existed seamlessly. And as a writer and as a creator myself who has written something similar when it comes to magic and science, it's really hard when you write to get that blend to come together very well. And He-Man was one of the few series growing up that really did a great job of intertwining the worlds of magic and science seamlessly. There was no divide in my mind anytime I saw that series. And another series that did it really well was Voltron, especially more so the legendary defender over the other Voltron, which I believe was the vehicle Voltron. But the Lion Voltron basically was the one that had more magic, but they integrated magic and tech really well. And He-Man did that too. But now in this world, the magic is dying, so the tech is rising, and you know, so much so that you have characters who are making a living off of the fact that magic is no longer relevant, or becoming more and more irrelevant every single day. So they're creating cults of technophiles. They convert them into biotechnical organisms, similar to the Phalanx in the X-Men. These things are really good in one sense, but at the same time I feel that they take away from what I believe to be canon. You know, simple little things. At the same time, I really liked it. I really enjoyed it because they deviated. You know, they didn't deviate too much, but they deviated just enough for it to be interesting without being sacrilege, in my opinion. And the story was great. You know, there were other. The only episode that didn't really have a reveal was episode 4, but the first 3 episodes and the last episode had really huge reveals. So if you're a fan of this series, you know, you're gonna be there with your mouth agape, like at least 80% of the time, wondering like, oh wow, that's crazy. At the end of it though, I think the best reveal happened, and this is the part where you find out that He-Man is not a singular entity, meaning that he is not, nor has he ever been, the only guardian of Castle Grayskull. There's 2 things to be said. You find out that Castle Grayskull is just a front for something else. Right? There's something that lies beneath or behind the walls of Castle Grayskull, and it's basically a repository of magic. This is one of the things that I really liked about it, because this tied up a loose end that always existed in the original series for me, which was, why was Skeletor so obsessed with getting into Castle Grayskull and learning its secrets? And in this series, you find out that he finally did his research, and he finds out that Castle Grayskull was just a front for a place called the Hall of Wisdom, which is the repository of all magic. And because he is a sorcerer, a warlock, a wizard, what have you, he now wants that power for himself. the other thing that I really enjoyed was the fact that you find out that He-Man is not the only guardian, nor has he ever been the only guardian for Castle Grayskull, and that the castle is actually named for the first guardian of Grayskull, whose name is Grayskull, and he's a person of color, which blew my mind. But it was awesome, and these things all together made the series so good. So any problems that I had with the series kind of went out the window with that last episode, because the last episode was so good. You know, it's about, you know, you find out that Adam as He-Man, Teela finds out Skeletor, Adam and Skeletor, or He-Man and Skeletor die in the first episode, like I said. And then in the last episode, they're both resurrected. And that's awesome as well. What they did with this series is they completed a cycle within 5 episodes that most series can't do in 12 or 24 episodes. So that's one of the reasons why I believe the series is so good. You can literally sit down and watch the entire series in an hour and a half or in less than 2 hours. So I think that this is one of those series that everyone should pick up and watch. It's not a full meal, but it definitely is a snack. It is something that I think anyone who is a He-Man fan will enjoy. Anyone who's not a He-Man fan, they'll enjoy it as well. So check it out and let me know what you think in the comments below. That's it for right now. And as always, stay blessed, stay peaceful, and stay loving.